Good afternoon. My name is Greg Sandifer. I'm from the Gori law firm. And on behalf of the Gori law firm, it's an honor to be one of the sponsors of this conference. And it's my pleasure to be here to introduce the next panel topic. The next session here, we're going to learn about global ban asbestos action. So here we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and appreciate the introduction. Again, my name is Brent Kynock. I now get to move to the moderator's seat. I'm pretty excited about that. We've got a great panel assembled for you this afternoon representing 5 different countries when we're talking about global ban asbestos action. Our first speaker is Sharon Gayoso. And let me tell you a little bit about Sharon because you've not met her yet for our attendees and our viewers. Sharon became a warrior in this fight in 2014 when her husband was diagnosed with malignant pleural mesothelioma. So not only is Sharon a warrior, but their entire family have become warriors in this fight. I'll turn the floor over to Sharon.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, Linda, for inviting me to speak at this very important conference. I live in Miami, Florida, and I'm very proud to be speaking on mesothelioma and other asbestos-related diseases to showcase why we must take action to ban this lethal substance. My journey with mesothelioma began in 2014, and like you, this asbestos-related disease has changed me, my family, all my relatives forever. My husband was a newspaper reporter, and he then became a litigation attorney. We never anticipated that asbestos exposure in his late teens would cause a deadly illness. And the photo that you're viewing is our core 4 at the very beginning of Jay's journey. I learned about the ADAO in 2015 when I met Linda in person finally in 2018 at a live conference. And her passion for the immediate eradication of asbestos use and importation was and still is inspiring. I wholeheartedly agree with her and my late husband's surgeons, Drs. Flores and Wolf, that no asbestos, no mesothelioma. Let's think about that phrase for just a minute. It's genius in its simplicity. And together, we all have the power to prevent this cancer. Together, we need to make a stand. And together, we need to let our government know that life is more important than corporate profit. I would like to focus my talk on 3 specific questions. How did we get here? Why did these companies use such a harmful substance? And is there anything we can do about it right now? To answer question number 1, we gather here today because for more than 50 years, asbestos has been incorporated into about 3,000 plus products as a fireproofing agent. During these 50 years, from the Great Depression to the fall of the Berlin Wall, asbestos was referred to as a miracle mineral. And its use ranged from the insulation on a boiler to the fake snow sprinkled on a Christmas tree. And many of you may remember the snowdrift product growing up as a child. I know I do. Asbestos as an idea was so integrated into our social conscious that the comic book company Marvel invented characters named Asbestos Lady. She was popular on a comic book in 1947 known as the Human Torch. And then there was also Asbestos Man. He made his debut in 1963. And strangely, as much as the comic book is named Strange Tales, asbestos also followed suit in those years on a multitude of products. Later, we the public would learn that asbestos is not a miracle mineral. In fact, we also learned that the companies who produced the asbestos-containing components lied to us. And we now know that these companies sold us death masquerading as a miracle. Now, you may think that the story ends there, but there is no way that the companies would still incorporate a death agent into their products. But we were wrong. The fight is not over. There are no safe levels of asbestos exposure, and the substance must be banned once and for all. So to answer the first question, how did we get here? We're here today because asbestos use and importation is still not banned in the United States. And together we must join as one and do what we should have done 50 years ago and ban the substance once and for all. To answer question 2, companies who incorporated asbestos into their products were not the first, and they'll certainly not be the last, to make dangerous products. As we are all aware, harmful substances are used daily. We know that gasoline is flammable. We know that TNT explodes. And we know that carbon monoxide inhalation is toxic. However, the difference between asbestos and the use of these other harmful substances is that the producers of asbestos-containing products neglected to inform us about the dangers associated with their products. These manufacturers took away our ability to choose, our free will, our right to know. So in answer to the second question, why did these companies use such a harmful substance? We now know they used asbestos because these companies chose profit over a loved one's life. This article in the Harvard Business Review by Bill Sells, a Johns Manville manager, details the known connection between asbestos and lung cancer since the 1930s, as well as Johns Manville's denial. The company was unwilling and unable to believe in the long-term consequences of these known hazards. And finally, to answer question 3, is there anything we can do now? Absolutely. There are several things we can do. First, let's congratulate the ADAO, Linda and her team, for their legal victories against the EPA, which will help to shape the future of asbestos reporting and legacy asbestos risk evaluation. We can also help the ADAO by calling on Congress to pass the Alan Reinstein Ban Asbestos Now Act. This legislation would ban the manufacturing, processing, importation, use, and distribution of 6 forms of asbestos in the United States. And second, patients should retain the best asbestos-focused law firms in their country and hit the asbestos manufacturers where it hurts, in their wallets. How do you know which firm to choose? You choose a firm that specializes in asbestos litigation. You choose a firm that publicly discloses its trial verdicts. You choose a firm where third-party publications like US News and World Report discusses the firm's success. And of course, you do your own research. You refrain from calling the legal marketing firms advertised on TV, those 1-800 numbers. And you should understand that there are statutes of limitations in which you can file a claim, and this varies by state. Finally, we need to raise public awareness and provide education about the dangers of asbestos. Together, we all need to follow ADAO and Linda's lead. We need to become more involved in the Asbestos Disease Awareness Organization and join us in educating and advocating and being a part of our community. The final slide shows my husband, Jay, in his last public viewing. He's with my son at the Rangers game. And what you don't see, and what I highlighted in the text, is that Andrew was carrying his oxygen. He could barely make it up the steps. No one should have to endure what my family and so many others have endured. But together, we can all make a difference. Thank you. I appreciate you listening.
And Sharon, thank you so much. Thank you for your strong and powerful voice. We're all with you. Thank you very much for sharing those words and photos.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
I want to introduce you to our next speaker, who you've already met before, and that's Dr. Barry Castleman, who will speak to us about efforts in Italy. Dr. Castleman.
So what's happening in Italy is that unlike most of the world, the Italians consider death on the job potentially a criminal matter. And they've actually put businessmen in jail for giving workers occupational cancer through their negligence and failure to protect the workers. All right, I'm going to do 2 subjects very quickly. First, I'm going to talk about the struggle that we've had in the United States with the remaining industry that persists in using imported asbestos fiber, and that's the chlor-alkali industry. They use it in something called diaphragms to separate the electrodes in the electrolytic process of making chlorine out of mined salt. And there are other processes that are completely different, or even the diaphragm cells can be made with non-asbestos diaphragms now, and so these are available from companies, and a number of the chlorine companies have plans to go asbestos-free with the non-asbestos diaphragms, which is a cheaper process change. You don't have as much of a fixed cost converting to the non-asbestos diaphragms, and in fact, they pay for themselves in about 3 or 4 years in increased energy efficiency and better product performance. But even that's not good enough for the companies to do it on their own out of the goodness of their corporate hearts. And so they persist in saying that these 3 companies, Olin, OxyChem, and Westlake, continue to run 8 plants, which still make about 40% of the chlorine in the United States. And they're doing it with the old asbestos diaphragms in plants that are all at least 40 years old. One of them was from 1898. Next slide, please. We can do that. The ban legislation, the Alan Reinstein Act, would ban the importation of asbestos and end the use of asbestos diaphragms in 2 years. EPA regulations would do about the same thing, although they'd probably be challenged in the courts and might take longer. The chlorine industry has long recognized the hazards of the process. They've published a booklet about all the different ways that you can get asbestos diaphragm material splattered around on the floors and the equipment, and then that would dry and create a hazard to the workers. This has been well recognized by the chlorine producers for a long time. The companies have absolutely refused to disclose their plans to modernize. We have tried to meet with the representative of the American Chemistry Council, which has been putting out the industry propaganda on this issue, and the Queen of Chlorine refused to meet with me and answer questions about their plans, the individual company plans, to phase out the use of asbestos. The chlorine producers make the ridiculous claim that banning asbestos in the diaphragm cells would cause a shortage of chlorine for water treatment. The use of chlorine for water treatment is only about 5 to 10% of the market and could easily be handled by the non-asbestos producers. We are getting closer to the end of asbestos use in the United States, and hopefully between either banning asbestos or EPA regulations, we'll finally get these people to modernize their technology. And a ban on asbestos in the United States would go further in banning the importation of asbestos brake pads and asbestos engine gaskets and other things, including yarn and thread that's still used, that's coming in at 50 to 100 tons a year from Mexico, and the EPA hasn't tracked down who's importing it and what in the world they're doing with it in the United States. But these are the kinds of things that we would like to shut down with a U.S. ban on asbestos. So that takes care of that subject. Now for the Italian situation that I was starting to talk about. In Italy, death on the job is considered potentially a criminal matter, and they have actually put businessmen in jail for negligence in operating industrial plants wherein workers developed occupational cancers that were preventable, going back to the dye industry in the 1970s. Now, this is Stefan Schmidt-Heine. Mr. Schmidt-Heine is 75 years old. At the age of 29, he became the chief executive officer of the Swiss Eternit Group. His qualifications for that job included the fact that his family owned a big chunk of the Swiss Eternit Group. And one of the first things that Stefan Schmidt-Heine did, according to evidence that has come out in the criminal trials that have so far been conducted in Italy, is that he brought his managers together twice in 1976 because they were afraid that by this time that the unions in the different countries where they operated these plants were going to start to talk to each other and raise awareness about the dangers of asbestos and make all kinds of demands that the companies had never had to face as long as the workers didn't know the asbestos was killing them. And so Schmidt-Heine had these training sessions to train his managers of how to lie to the public and the journalists and the politicians, and how to threaten the unionists who raised concerns about asbestos that they would lose their jobs if they didn't shut up and go back to work. He has been criminally prosecuted. The case went to trial and was resolved in 2012. Schmidt-Heine was convicted of creating an environmental disaster, sentenced to 16 years in jail. The case then went to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal added some deaths in Naples that hadn't been included in the hundreds of deaths from Casale Monferrato and other parts of Italy, and raised the sentence to 18 years in jail, blaming Mr. Schmidt-Heine for having run a cover-up that delayed the ban on asbestos in Italy by 10 years. And people would come to the auditorium where the trials were being held. All of the people in Casale have been affected by this situation. Something like 3,000 deaths in a town of 35,000 from mesothelioma. Everybody knows somebody who's had this happen to them. And so the trial, Schmidt-Heine's conviction was overturned on the last appeal in 2014 on the grounds of a legal technicality that the statute of limitations for prosecution of creating an environmental disaster runs 10 years after the closure of the plant in 1986. And so the convictions were thrown out. But by that time, the legendary prosecutor who had filed the original cases had filed murder charges against Schmidt-Heine. Murder has no statute of limitations in Italy. And so those trials then, after fighting through the courts for 4 years about how it was going to be resolved,
40 years gone again.
it was determined that there would be 4 separate trials, one in each of the jurisdictions of Italy where the deaths had occurred. 2 of those trials have now been concluded. Schmidt-Heine was convicted in Turin in 2019, sentenced to 4 years in jail. He was convicted in Naples in a second trial this year and sentenced to 3.5 years in jail. And the Turin trial, the original conviction, has been upheld on its first appeal. And the big trial is for the 392 deaths in Casale Monferrato. That case is now in its final stages. The defense is putting on their case. The prosecutors have completed putting on their case, and a verdict is expected in the next couple of months. So that is the state of play. Hopefully the Court of Appeals in Italy, or rather the highest court, the Court of Cassation, will, being confronted with multiple convictions of manslaughter and murder, will not see fit to overturn it. This is an example of the evidence that came out in the trial. This is from the public relations people of Schmidt-Heine from one of their memos, and basically they have levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 from the bottom to the top. Level 1 is the managers of the Italian subsidiary, and level 2 is the Swiss Eternit Group, which is by 1992 just a shell company. It had already been cashed in and sold. All the money had gone into level 3, a company called Anova, and level 4 is STS, Stefan Schmidt-Heine himself. And the plan, according to the public relations people, was to put all the responsibility on the Italian managers and the empty shell company, and no mention even in Italy of where all the money went to the Swiss company Anova, or no mention of Stefan Schmidt-Heine himself. So he wasn't even known in Italy very widely. Once the trial started, he was even compared with Hitler in the final solution plans that were made in Wannsee in the beginning of 1942, the industrialization of the Holocaust. And the asbestos catastrophe was compared to that by the Court of Appeal. And so the struggle goes on. The people in Casale Monferrato have had a dreadful time going through all of these disappointments and delays, but they still hang in there. The signs say Eternit Justice. And so I have gone through the situation with respect to the trials. And I just conclude by saying that the corporate documents show that the corporate decisions were always made as business decisions by the people who made them, that people like the company docs and the company industrial hygienists didn't run the company. We see that time and again in the United States. And the 5-part formula for prevention of environmental and occupational disease: information, regulation, compensation, humiliation, and incarceration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Castleman. Always entertaining, and we appreciate you staying abreast of all those developments with that fine gentleman. Our next speaker is joining us via a recorded video, and that's Carmen Lima. Carmen is from Portugal. Let me tell you just a bit about her before she shares with us. Carmen has a degree in environmental engineering with a specialization in environmental management. She has a postgraduate degree in sustainable construction, a master's degree in sustainable planning and construction, and she's currently a PhD student in environmental engineering, researching the issue of asbestos. So she certainly has a great mind for what's going on. She is actually the founder and a director of an organization in Portugal dealing with asbestos and the concerns around asbestos. And I hope that we have her video almost ready.
I would like to thank Linda for the amazing work she has been done in the United States. Her history, her experience, and her mission to ban asbestos in the United States is an example for all of us. We are here together to learn with each other, to share our work, to give what we have, and to be a global ban asbestos family. It is very important to me and to SOS Asbestos to be at the ADAO 16th Annual International Asbestos Awareness and Prevention Conference, so we appreciate the invitation. Since 2003, I have followed the issue of asbestos through public participation to legislate on the subject, promotion of the debate and awareness concerning various public bodies on the need to carry out the diagnostic of public and private buildings and other infrastructures containing asbestos. My name is Carmen Lima. I am an environmental engineer specialized in environmental management and sustainable construction. I am a PhD student in environmental engineering researching in the issue of asbestos. I am the founder and the coordinator of SOS Asbestos, the Portuguese Association Against Asbestos, the first group in Portugal dedicated to support asbestos victims, victims' relatives, other people that need information on asbestos, or other related issue about sustainable way to remove materials and manage asbestos-containing materials. The SOS Asbestos is committed to promote the protection and prevention of exposure to asbestos and its eradication through the total removal of this contaminating in public and private buildings, infrastructures, and equipment in Portugal. More than 60 countries have already banned asbestos, and half of these countries belongs to European Union. But doesn't mean that we have no more a problem. Europe and European Commission members such as Portugal continues to have the need to control the entries of asbestos incorporated in materials for construction and other sectors from countries such as China. On the other hand, we have problems associated with the asbestos that has installed in materials and equipment in public and private buildings or infrastructures. In 2014, I have been invited to present the Portuguese situation with other European Commission members in European Economic and Social Committee. And in 2015, this organization published an opinion that came to present asbestos as a priority issue in Europe. Last year, the European Parliament sent to the European Commission a proposal to analyze the possibility to obligate the member states to define rules to protect the workers against asbestos. This proposal defines 6 different goals: the European strategy to remove all the asbestos, a European framework directive to protect the asbestos exposure workers, a European directive to remove to define all the remove strategies, recognize the asbestos-related disease and compensation for this disease, the asbestos screen prior to carrying out energy renovation works and selling or retenting a building, and define the Union as a world leader against asbestos. The European Parliament considers a prior diagnosis to be fundamental, as well as other important aspects that should be considered a priority. The numbers in Portugal are less expressive than the other European countries, but we believe they are far from the reality. In relation to workers, 98% of occupational disease are not reported, so that only 2% of disease caused by exposure to asbestos are considered as an occupational disease. Besides, there are different parameters for the characterization of occupational disease in the European Union, which leads to the same disease that can be marked in one country and not in another. In Portugal, the official numbers are low. There are many mesotheliomas that are misdiagnosed, lung cancers caused by exposure to asbestos that are not quantified. Only 36 deaths per year are from mesothelioma. 578 schools with asbestos were identified, and in this identification, only asbestos covering were flagged. This misdiagnosis provoked a popular pressure that results in the implementation of a program in Portugal with the name of Eradicate Asbestos in School. This program was applied with the modernization works for Portuguese schools and only remove asbestos in 2,000 schools. Portugal has now started to take the first steps to manage asbestos. First, we define legislation. One, to protect the workers from asbestos exposure, the other to regulate the removal market, and another to define the criteria to waste containing asbestos. This legislation isn't the best tool and doesn't have the best practice or the best protection incorporated in the criteria, so the results are not the best one compared to the other countries in Europe, such as France, Poland, Netherlands, or Germany. Currently, in companies in Portugal, those who remove asbestos does not need a license or a professional portfolio or any certification. It promotes non-compliance situations, lack of accuracy, and protections on asbestos removals. We have worked a lot with the unions to pressure the Portuguese government to give the importance to this issue, but not all our requests have been accepted so far. A survey of public buildings containing asbestos was carried out and published. The actions are underway to remove asbestos for several buildings. and the obligations to identify the asbestos in private buildings are also defined. Similar to the COVID-19 phase, when real experts in pandemics, infections, disease, or public health without a single degree in medicine parodied through traditional media or social networks, here also several pseudo-experts in asbestos have appeared. The Portuguese population was terrified by the existence of asbestos coverings in schools and starts a movement of parents demanding the fast removal. We had a lot of actions in the schools, and SOS Asbestos have organized someone to pass all the need information for the parents. There was no clarification on the other schools and no information about the works that will be done. Asbestos removals in schools in Portugal was not carried out by a single company, national or international, with certification. And in many cases, the fiber cement was removed while the school was running during the night or even on weekends. The school was reoccupied with an ensuring that the WHO requirements to classify it as a clean area. The protection suits worn by the workers, which must be replaced every 3 hours, were used in the removal for days in a row. The projected owners, like City Hall, did not even know about those health protection rules or good practices that should be implemented in this type of intervention. Actions to mitigate and eliminate occupational and environmental exposures and in schools removal program was a miscommunications for parents and schools professionals, and a responsibility in communication a message that may not correspond to the truth because nobody knows in Portuguese schools if they are now free from asbestos, not even the ones that were interventional. Initially, the topic was treated from the perspective of legal compliance, but it was quickly realized that this topic caused anxiety and in the population and can have a strong impact on their lives. So it could be a good topic to adopt by the politicians and their movements. Intervening all the schools without exception, it is really a priority, but this intervention will have to be carried out with the aim of removing asbestos completely, carrying out with rigor, seriously, and with scrupulous compliance with the technical criteria in order to prevent the health and all those involved. Planning work and approaching asbestos from sustainable perspective is important. The European Ecological Pact itself stabilizes rules for a new wave of renovation of the community buildings and define rules to trigger this renovation was based on the promotion of energy efficiency in millions of buildings in the European Union where asbestos fiber can be found. Portugal have a lot work to be done. Despite the terrible examples we have had in terms of bed removal, we had also good causes where we can present as a good example. The removal of asbestos from the carriage that Portugal bought from Spain, in which SOS Asbestos followed and pressed for it to be done by the book. It was a story of a sustainable and compliance with health protection requirements for workers and future users of these trains. Another good example was the Funchal vessel, a historic ship that was bought by American investors and that contained more than 70 tons of asbestos, the blue asbestos. The work was accompanied by me within the scope of my PhD and monitored during 6 months of work. Of the 3 factors that are used asbestos to produce fiber cement products, Cimianto is the only one that is as it was on the last day it worked. I carry out its diagnosis, an impressive experience, and I am waiting for European funding for its discontamination. Despite the ban asbestos, Portugal has got a lot of work to be done. We need to update Portuguese legislation and standards to the European average. It takes a lot of focus to prepare this team on the following challenge: create tools to license companies and enable workers, define a Portuguese strategy for asbestos, train and sensitize the actors, managers, architects, and engineers, workers from all sectors that come into contact with asbestos, politicians, and journalists, create better rules for asbestos removal and worker protection, update measures to protect and prevent works, healthily apply the best practices in the management of waste containing asbestos for all. We have to work together to achieve quite results. Thank you very much. Please feel free to contact me if you need some information and some more things about the situation of Portugal. Thank you, Linda, and good work for all of us.
Thanks to Carmen for a great presentation on the situation in Portugal, which is, I don't know about the rest of you, was surprising to me at some of the things that are occurring there or not occurring there, as the case may be. Our next speaker, you've already met, and she really needs no introduction because when she walks in a room, she fills the room with her personality. That's Fernanda Gianassi, who's from Brazil. Fernanda.
Okay. Good afternoon, my dear friends and members of the ADAO family. On behalf of Linda Heinstein, I thank you for the opportunity to be here once again with you and share our common experience and problems. Next. Thanks, Linda. It shows our asbestos mine in the central region of the country, owned by Eternit, which continues to operate despite the ban on asbestos due to an unconstitutional state law that defies a decision released by our Supreme Court that in 2017 ruled that the use of asbestos is banned in whole Brazil. The industry claims that their production is only for export to countries like the United States, Mexico. United States are used as propaganda. Mexico and mainly India, Thailand, Indonesia, and other countries in Asian continent. This reprehensible practice of double standards or double moral should be considered a non-bailable crime of environmental racism. Next. Our judicial system is limping. Next. As I have shown you on other occasions, this shameful image of a courthouse in the mining town this city is called the National Asbestos Capital in Brazil, is decorated with this chrysotile stone weighing 2 tons. Next. For 5 years, we have been waiting for the judgment of appeals from the mining industry that are merely procrastinating measures. For 3 years, we have been waiting for the Supreme Court to declare this immoral law, state law, unconstitutional. What can we expect from this justice, which take years to conclude a trial? And as one of our most prominent jurists said, delayed justice is nothing more than institutionalized injustice. Next, on the 21st of September, the Supreme Court's judgments are on the agenda again, under the new presidency of a very strict woman. She was my colleague at the Labor Ministry years ago. Recently is sworn in. Her name is Rosa Weber, the justice, and she included, as soon she sworn in the agenda, all these actions stopped in the court for 5 years. We hope on September 21st that finally, after so many postponed, this is as the end of this social environmental catastrophe. Next, the only industry operating illegally in the country besides the mining company is the American Dow Chemical in the state of Bahia, producing chlor-alkalis. Their authorization to use asbestos expired yesterday, and I hope it will not be renewed. Its competitors, including the American group Oxychem Olin, have already replaced the asbestos in Brazil. Please help us to stop them using asbestos, denouncing Dow Chemical here in US, please. Our actions to prevent the export of asbestos through our maritime port complex were successful with the recent decision by the second degree of the Labor Court in São Paulo State, next, confirming that asbestos cannot be exported through the 3 cities that make up this largest maritime complex in the country, including the city where I currently live in, behind these mountains, which I call it my earthly paradise. I live there, behind the mountains. Next one, this decision, please, confirms the prohibition after several attempts by the industry with their appeals presented by the best lawyers they can buy with their blood-stained money. Sorry, the colleagues here, the lawyer, sorry. But I learned a lot from, yes, good guys, yes. I checked before. With Linda, of course. Who are these guys? Are they good guys? Okay. And I learned a lot from Dr. Castleman all these years about how Americans colloquially conceptualize important statements as not in my backyard, I love this, or the best money, the best the money can buy. It is superb, superb, because it's simple, but full of meaning, yeah? I congratulate you, Americans, for this, not because you are still allowing the asbestos. The next is my drama, my new drama. This is the most recent drama, a horrible asbestos legacy. I am, of course, involved because I'm always in troubles. You know this very well. And of course. And it's taking me up a lot of time and energy. This aircraft carrier, scrapped by France, was purchased in Brazil in 1990 for $10.5 million. He never played his role properly. It was a scrap. In 22 years, this monster that I have nicknamed Leviathan, okay, the monster, okay, with 266 meters in length and weighing 32,000 tons, having been in maintenance and stopped at the shipyard for a long time until the Brazilian Navy decided to get rid of this metallic monster and sold it in an auction full of irregularities to a Turkish ship owner who bought the old ship for $2 million to take it to be dismantled in Aliaga in Turkey. The inventor of hazardous material, the IHM, only presented data from 12% of the areas and said that there are 9 tons of asbestos inside the ship. It was not complete, of course, but based on this incomplete HMI, our environmental agency, linked to Bolsonaro, of course, issued a license for the vessel to be towed by a Dutch company, of course, okay? Under protests from several European, American, and Turkish NGOs, the ship was stopped while it was closed the Strait of Gibraltar, and is now returned to Brazil to comply with the Basel Convention, which Brazil is part of. In Brazil, a new inventory will be carried out, and the asbestos removal will be done before returning to the waters of the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. One point, in Brazil, we are not specialized dismantling ships, break shipping. We don't have this. It will be chaotic, this work, I am afraid of, for the workers, of course. This novel is the odyssey of our times. Shame to Brazilian Navy and the mediocre and criminal president of Brazil, Jair Messias. You believe he has Messiah like a middle name. It's ridiculous. Okay, Bolsonaro. I will repeat it 1,000,000 times a day, fora Bolsonaro, out, out, out. He's a genocide. 8,000 deaths of COVID is over his head. And I hope he will in jail to pay account of this one day. I really hope for this. Johnson & Johnson recently announced it will stop producing and marketing baby powder in Brazil in 2023. Why is it only now they will stop to produce and trade the talc, the baby powder, since we have a substitute sold in Brazil based on corn starch for a long time? How many lives could have been saved if the company complied with their proclaimed concept of mission, vision, and values, preservation of life, their products, and its so-called, in quotes, compliances? Next, finally, I would like to share this simple, modest, humble monument that we, please, the next one, we will inaugurate on December 10th in Osasco, which is our capital of asbestos diseases in Brazil. It will be our asbestos victims memorial in a small square next to the old Eternit factory. It's a long tree, okay? A long tree, so named to represent the life that needs air and lungs intact and free from asbestos fibers. The image I have in my mind, and I suffer a lot for this, is the people dying breathless, like fishes, with their open mouth, searching for the air. The leaves of this tree represent the shape of the pulmonary trees. The brown stem, the asbestos fibers, and the blue rings, the interaction with the universe. There will be also a plaque with hundreds of names of the fatal asbestos victims whose suffering, and they will not remain invisible anymore. The death will be not in vain. There are our heroes. Alan Reinstein's name will be carved there. Emily, you didn't know this. And for us, it's our pleasure to have Alan with our victims, okay? To show that our fight is worldwide. No song represents our struggle as well as the aria from the Turandot opera by Puccini, Nessun Dorma. Nobody sleeps. Nobody can't sleep. I end here today with this call. Let us not sleep. Let us not abandon our struggle while there will be one victim of one of the major industrial catastrophe of our times. The song says, disappear the night, rest stars, At dawn, I will win. I will win, and I will say, we will win together. We will win together. Thank you, and give our hands, because our struggle is not easy. It's not for coward people. We need to work together. Thanks, Linda. For ADAO, Abreya will be present with you and the others always.
Emily and I are deeply touched, and I know Alan represents the hundreds of thousands of Alans, so we humbly and modestly say thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Fernanda. Always appreciate your words and your passion for the work you do in Brazil. Our final speaker here is our friend and advocate in Australia, Barry Robson. Barry is joining us remotely. He is the president of the Asbestos Disease Foundation of Australia, and he's been an active union member and delegate for most of his working life. He is fighting the good fight down under, so to speak. And Barry, we welcome you.
Well, it's good morning from Sydney, Australia, and good afternoon after there. The fight still goes on, even though we've had asbestos banned since 2003, and that is a complete ban. We are still finding imports into Australia, mainly from Asian countries, where products manufactured there are imported into Australia. The last big case was 5 brand new ferries for Sydney Harbour. And when they arrived, they were inspected. They had a certificate saying they were asbestos free. But when the crews got on board these new ferries, they were riddled with asbestos all through the engine compartments and that. So they had to be stripped down. We are still getting building products coming through mainly from China containing asbestos, but also accompanied by a certificate saying they were asbestos free. The other thing that's happened in Western Australia, which is our largest state, it had a operational blue asbestos mine closed down in the late 70s, but people were still living in the town attached to the mine. And these people, they must be brain dead, said there was no problem living there in amongst the old mine workings. The government of Western Australia had to bring in special legislation so they could remove these idiots, brain dead zombies, for their own sake and their families, to be removed legally. And so the remediation of the mine can take place. Now that the COVID issue has, hasn't gone away completely here in Australia, but it has meant that the activity by the trade union movement of Australia, namely the AFIDA group, who have been doing a lot of work in Southeast Asia, mainly in Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam. Prior to the COVID pandemic hitting, they were making great strides in convincing those 3 governments, Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam, to bring in a ban. But when the pandemic hit, all of that work stopped. But they're back in there now and taking it up again to try and have it banned. Since we spoke, we've had a change of federal government here in Australia, a progressive government. How can I relate it to, Democrats, but it's a Labor government here in Australia. And I know that part of the policy or the platform is to keep the ban of asbestos in place and that. So hopefully with this new government, we can really put a stop to these imports that are still coming into Australia. So that's basically what's been happening down under. The research into a cure goes on. There's been a new research group formed called TOGA, which is made up of the top professors and surgeons and that. Their aim is to find a cure. So we look forward to the results coming out of TOGA. So in closing, because it's been a long day, and I can see by the time that we're running way behind schedule, I've got to go back to bed. I've been sitting up since 4 o'clock this morning. So Linda, thanks once again for allowing me to participate, and to all of my international colleagues. Keep up the good fight. You'll get there in the end. And to my American friends, keep it going. You're nearly there. Congratulations so far. But as you know, it's not there yet. But you'll get that ban in place. All the best from Australia.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you very much for joining us. And go back to bed, please.
Wait, I have to just say, I'm blowing you a big red kiss, Barry. We don't think you actually have, we think you have pajamas on.
You want me to stand up and see the jammies?
No, after 2 years of Zoom, we're nervous. Thank you, Barry.
I've got the jammies on underneath, don't worry.
Well, we'll be having a Wharfie call later, but thank you. What a great panel. We do need to take a photograph. Don't go anywhere. We're going to open up for a very short amount of questions, but I just want to make sure I saw your little face.
Hello, Barry. My name is Ethan. I am chatting with you for the United States. My question for you was, compared to what's going on in the United States and the rest of the world, what's Australia's response to limiting the amount of products with asbestos in them, and what we can do to decrease the amount of asbestos found for future generations?
That's a great question, my friend. The organisations here in Australia, and the unions, have been putting a lot of pressure on the border force, the old customs. I think you've got the same over there in the US. We keep saying to them that they can stop these imports in the country of origin. I mean, it's not rocket science. They know that every container that comes into Australia, they know where it's loaded, they know what's in it, and they hide behind the excuse, oh, well, we can't search every container. They don't have to search every container that comes into Australia. All they got to do is go back to find the manufacturer, go to them, go to that factory in China and say, you know, you're not going to be allowed to sell your product in Australia. Simple as that. You know, but that is, it's still a massive problem, getting these imports. And as I say, mainly from China and Southeast Asia. That's why the unions here in Australia have put a lot of time and money and effort, years of effort, into trying to get a ban in them Southeast Asian countries. Once that's achieved, then the next big one is India. That's another problem for us with imports.
Well, thank you for your answer.
Thanks, Ethan.
Thank you, Linda.
This is a question for Fernanda. You showed the bottle of the container of Johnson & Johnson powder. And I'm wondering, was it intended in your ban, in the ban in Brazil, to include consumer products like that? What was the scope of the ban in this asbestos in Brazil?
Yeah, thank you, Celeste. Also, the talc contaminated with asbestos is included in our law that banned asbestos. But we need to analyze, we needed to check this. One of the problems when I was at the Labor Ministry was to test the samples. Arthur knows this because part of the samples I collected during my inspections, I had to send to US to analyze here, okay, talc. We have very deposits of anthophyllite in Brazil. And the talc is in general, they're contaminated with anthophyllite. For example, I inspected a mine of anthophyllite that the owner transformed in a spa in the area, a big, beautiful area in a spa to take care for the health and beauty, and the cosmetics were produced with anthophyllite, okay? And it was hard for me to test the products in Brazil. I don't know if there's a lawyer from Johnson & Johnson here, because I can't do this, but some samples of okay. I will tell you. I tested some samples of the talc produced and traded by Johnson & Johnson in Brazil, and I will tell you after the results, okay? You know this. Okay.
Linda's putting Arthur and I on the spot.
Arthur said you wanted to.
No. We were supposed to do a hoo-ha.
Right.
I don't know what Linda means by a hoo-ha, but what I would say is that we've had a great conference, and I really appreciate all the speakers that have been here to speak, both personally here in Atlanta and on video from all over the world. And we're getting ready now to go into our awards ceremony, and I just want to thank you all for coming and taking the time to participate with us. It's advancing the cause of getting rid of asbestos throughout the world, and that's what we're here for. Arthur?
It's always an honor to be at these meetings and to share these words with my co-chair of the Scientific Advisory Board and have several members of that board present today. And my comment is, having been associated, as Dick has, for as long as this organization's been around and has been holding meetings, I just said it to Linda, I'll say it in public, the meetings keep getting better and better and better. The meetings have been great over the years, but the quality, the organization, the information that gets shared, the scope with the huge number of participants from around the world today just keeps showing the hard work Linda, Ellen, and others put in, Emily, everybody who sees that this happens. So yeah, come on up here. And Celeste, of course.
Is this our farewell?
Yeah, this is sort of.
We want to have a group photo of everybody.
Yeah, everybody that's here.
We're just missing Robert Nolan.
Well, he's here in spirit, no doubt. No, you get between.
Oh,
the rose between two thorns. We try to be thorns in some people's sides, that's for sure. But what we're going to do is get this picture and then maybe ask everybody in the room to come up here, get a picture, and then we're going to move into the awards ceremony. It's important that ADAO recognizes the contribution of people, which we do every year at these meetings, and we'd like to recognize what people do and what they represent, and we will then move into the award ceremony. So thank you all here in our presence. Thank you all online. Another great day of ADAO, and just let's ask everybody who's here in the room to come on up now.
And would the volunteers who work so hard, would you all just identify yourself quickly? People don't know who you are.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Reinstein. I'm Linda's daughter, and very proud of you for putting on this conference, Mom, as always.
Ellen Costa, ADAO board member.
Celeste Monfortin. I do a lot of work with Linda on behalf of the American Public Health Association.
Risha Patel. I've interned for Linda for about 6 years going on now. She inspired me to get my MPH as well right out of undergraduate school. So she's been a real mentor, and I enjoy coming to every single conference.
Well, it's been great, and we are going to get a group photo, but to everybody who participated, we say thank you, and to everybody who watched, and for those who are extra patient with our slight little hiccups along the way, we say thank you for your patience.